Then you get into, just real quick, and we'll probably jump back and forth between these four things here. Subsidiary motions, incidental, and privilege. Once you make a motion, as Sid just said, some motions need a second, some motions don't need a second. Some motions are debatable, some motions are non-debatable. To go through that, what motions are and what motions aren't, we'll be here till 5 o'clock if we go through each particular one. Most main motions need a second. Okay, once a second is made, what the chairman then does is, and this is where you need to really watch these guys, the chairman will pose the question, then the chairman will actually, what they call, put the question. Now, when they put that question, you need to be very, very aware of how they put the question to the floor. Because they can, if they reword it, not the way you actually, you need to be careful the way you pose a question. Because the way that it gets voted on, okay, that's, once that question is put to the floor, any change from those original words has to be done in the form of an amendment, which is, you get down to, which is in the subsidiary motion, okay? Then you get into a string of whole motions where you can make amendments to amendments. You can, vote on certain amendments and then make amendments to those amendments. And then you got to get all the way back to the main question. So you could actually get a string of amendments behind a main motion question put to the floor. Each one of those needs to be voted on to get back to that main motion. And that's where it really gets confusing, and this here should give you guys a little bit of a, okay, now I see what they're doing. It may take a couple meetings, because some of it is pretty fast-paced, where it's like, hey, wait, what the hell did they just do? Part of that's by design, okay? So, with your main motion, it gets a second, it gets put to the floor. You want to try to make sure when you put that question that it's a yes vote, no vote, a vote, nay vote. And you want to make sure that when that question gets put to the floor, that you're not asking them to approve something with a no vote. You want to make sure you're consistent. With approval, go with the a vote. They'll switch it around sometimes, like they do in the ballots, as we see with some of the issues. Or they'll turn the words around, and now you're actually voting against something you thought you were voting for. And that is a routine thing, at least where we're from. Bill, I don't know if that happens down here much.
Not that way, just kind of, we get to the point where it's like, in more of a casual way. We do follow at some point, and it does get changed a bit, but at the end it's like, we'll, okay, it gets to your point of order. What exactly are we voting for? And then we'll explain, okay, yes, no.
General meeting, this, again, when you start jockeying, when you guys get into this, and you start jockeying that you want this candidate to be endorsed over another candidate when they go through the endorsement proceedings, this is where they want to force someone and you want to block that, this is where all this stuff will come into play. Same with platforms, I'm sorry.
Is there some way that, like, if you bring in a motion that it can be worded so that the wording cannot be changed?
You address the motion, you never address the body itself. Even if you were talking about the body to the chairman, you would refer to them as the committee. And yes, that's why you want to be very careful when he puts that question. If he does not put it right, what you can do is, if you look down in the incidental motions, is a point of order. Point of order is going to be one of your favorite friends.
But there's no way, if I'm originating this motion, I could word it saying the wording cannot be changed.
You just call a point of order and you say, Mr. Chairman, that's not the way the question was put to you. And you make him change it. That can get, again, depending on
It's best to write it down.
Temperature in the room. And the other thing is, you guys, like, Bill's on the committee. When you guys start working together, you usually going to know what direction you're going. You're going to sit there and actually, okay, this is going to, we're going to ask this question. Okay, we're going to put it this way, do we have a second, who's gonna second this? Because you don't want the same person always up there, asking all the questions or, you know, nitpicking, if you will, because then that person sort of gets dismissed by some of the other people.
Like Bill said there, you can submit a motion, if you write it down, can you submit it in writing, or?
That depends on your county. That is because like.
I mean, that would clear up all the
That, like,
misinterpretation right
if you
there.
want a resolution passed, or if you want a question put, yes, you can write that down and submit it to the secretary and treasurer in one word. You could submit that to the secretary, okay, you could mail that in to them, or email it to them. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll ask the question in the meeting. That's
Well,
why.
some of this happens, so it's an ongoing thing during the meeting, so it's not necessarily something that you can plan ahead for.
They're not to, well, bring up Cuyahoga County, we want it on the agenda. And when you get into this, you'll see some things need prior notification, where it's a bylaw change, if you wanna see the disciplinary committee against somebody because they're doing something outside the bylaws or in violation of the bylaws. You need to actually notify the committee, the central committee, through the secretary, prior to that meeting taking place. So when that agenda gets mailed out, it should be listed on that agenda. If it's not on the agenda, and we've had this take place, as soon as that meeting starts, somebody needs to get up and call a point of order and challenge the agenda. But for that to happen, you also need the votes in the room to back them. All this, everything that you're gonna hear depends on having the votes in the room. All this means nothing without the votes.
In reference to that, the votes, in my county, which is Wayne County, there are X number of wards, precincts, whatever. And there are central committee representatives for, let's say, 80 central committee, elected central committee members. There are a substantial larger portion of that that are quoted in the executive committee as well. They don't get to vote, do they?
Yes,
They do.
yes.
So whether they're elected or non-elected by party members in the county, they get to vote anyway.
By statute, your central committee is supposed to be the strongest committee because they're the ones that are actually elected, okay? But yes, now see, like in our bylaws for Cuyahoga County, or not ours, I'm not in them, but the bylaws for Cuyahoga County's Republican Party, it states that you, and I'm not remembering them right now, but you could only have a certain, the executive committee should never be allowed to outnumber the central committee, because then you have the problem that you're probably experiencing. But that would be addressed in your bylaws. Okay, now, if there's nothing in there addressing that in your bylaws, you can get changes to the bylaws done to have that included in there.